Welcome everybody, this is Juan Soto, Microsoft Access MVP, one of only 21 in the world. My specialty is Access with SQL Server. This is part 2 of Microsoft Access with SQL Server Academy. Usually we would have had it done by earlier this month, but I was on vacation. Now I'm back on vacation, looking forward to sharing with you guys. Last month we were supposed to do it as well, but I ran into technical difficulties. But tonight we're going to be talking about, it's all about how to migrate your data to SQL Server, right? To take those initial steps. This is part 2 of a 4-part series. We're going to continue this next month in December and then January. Always on the second Tuesday of the month, unless of course there's something coming up like this time around where we had to go on vacation. Now, if you recall, if you haven't seen part 1, I do urge you to do that. Go to AccessUserGroups.org or go to the chapter and you'll see last month's video there. Or go to YouTube channel for AccessUserGroups.org. And there you'll also see month 1, the first month. It was really entertaining, the fact that we talked extensively about when you should upgrade to SQL Server, when you should not. Some gotchas, right? What is the number one thing you should do before you upgrade to SQL Server? And so I urge you to take a look at that. Although if you didn't do part 1, that's okay, because part 2 is where we get into real meat and potatoes. All right, so as part of your homework, you're supposed to have several things installed. Number 1, you're supposed to have Microsoft SQL Server, right? So, and I've gotten some questions. I recommend the Developer Edition, which is an enterprise. But basically, whatever SQL Server you have should be fine. So if you have SQL Server Express already, and that's fine, you can use that for this academy. You should have installed SQL Server Migration Assistant for Access, SSMA, right? SSMA is what we use to migrate data to SQL Server. So you should have that installed. And you should have configured your SQL Server. Now, I'm going to share my screen because I do have some tips here in terms of connecting your SQL Server with SQL Server Migration Assistant. All right, so you should be seeing my screen here. I need to make sure I can still see participants. I can let them in and the chat. So let me bring up those windows here before we get started again. Wonderful. Okay. So one of the things about installing SQL Server is when you install it, it really is locked down. I mean, Microsoft wants to make sure you're kept secure. And by the way, we're going to be using Google Gemini extensively throughout the academy here. So I'm going to start you off with a new conversation here. But here I have SQL Server Management Studio. I've already logged into my local SQL Server. And I've got SQL Server Migration Assistant here, all right? And so I'm going to start this from scratch. I was playing with it earlier. I'm going to say no to that. And I'm going to restart it. Now, when you start SQL Server Migration Assistant, it does start with this wizard. And I like the wizard. So if you have this wizard interface, I would encourage you to use it. It makes things a lot easier. But in my case, I already have a project started, so I'm just going to go in here, open the project, bring it up again. Now, I've already created a Northwind database using the Northwind Starter Edition. There's a reason I did that, because that database does have difficulties upgrading to SQL Server, and we're going to be looking at those difficulties. So, and then I already started. So maybe let me just do this from scratch. That way you guys can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to go into Microsoft Access. I'm going to go to File New. And I'm going to pick the Northwind Starter Edition. And I'm going to call this NW2 test. NW test 2. Now notice it's saved in my documents because we'll need to know that later. So I'm going to click on Create. And it downloads the template from the web, configures it, make sure everything is okay for me. There are several versions of the Northwind database, including the one created by George Hepworth and a group of dedicated current and former MVPs, because the original Northwind wasn't the best in terms of showing you best practices, but people were using it and they thought, well, if it's recommended by Microsoft, it's gotta be good. So they they overhauled the Northwind, but I'm going back to the original one, which is Starter Edition. I believe that's what this is. So I'm gonna click on Enable Content here. Don't really have to do that. And I'm gonna hit continue. And I'm just gonna exit out. All right, so I created my database. Now I'm gonna launch SQL Server Migration Assistant. Oh, here's the thing. If you install SQL Server, you're having difficulties connecting SQL Server Migration Assistant to Access, you need to launch the SQL Server Configuration Manager. Look at this at the top, right, left-hand corner. SQL Server Configuration Manager. The way you do that is you're going to go into your run box here, and you're going to type SQL Server Configuration Manager, which is this one. SQL Server. I have SQL Server 2022. If you have SQL Server Express, it might do that. Once you do that and hit yes, you're going to then go into protocols for communication. So you SQL Server Network Configuration. You're going to click on Protocol from SQL Server, and notice that in your case, in my case, excuse me, it was disabled. Now it's enabled. You're going to click on TCP/IP. You're going to go to IP addresses, and you're going to come down to the local IP address starts with 127. This one here. Make sure it says 127.0.1. You're going to enable that by clicking here, saying yes, and make sure it says 1433 as your port. Now you're able to then use the migration assistant with SQL Server. So it's a little tip there for you guys if you're having issues with that. If there anybody having issues connecting SQL Server migration assistant to SQL Server, well, let me know and I can help you out here. So I'm going to launch the migration assistant now. I'm going to use this tool and I'm going to call it Northwind Migration Test 3. Notice that I have to pick the version of SQL Server. So if you don't know the version of SQL Server installed, I have a really quick tip for you how to do that. You're going to go to SQL Server Management Studio. After you're logged in, you're going to hold down the Control key and press N as in Nancy. And then I'll bring up a new query window. I'm going to right click here and I'm going to say, okay, let me go ahead and new query. And then you're going to type, and I think I did this last month too, that's the first part one. You're going to type select stars ampersand version. Now think of ampersand version as constants in SQL Server. Right, they're read-only. And when I run this, everything can be done with a query in SQL Server. So that's a natural language called T-SQL. The T stands for transaction. This is 2022, right? So I've confirmed that. I'm going to go back to my migration assistant and I pick 22, which is great. Otherwise, if it is, now you can even migrate to Azure SQL by the way, which is wonderful. And even Azure, if you ever wonder what this is, Azure SQL Managed Instance, it's a more robust version of SQL Server. It starts at $2,000 a month on Azure. And we use it here at TMPAC to host our clients' data. All right, I'm going to click on next. And I'm going to add my database I just created, right? And so I'm going to go to documents. And let me sort this by date modified. And let's see, I don't see today's date on there. I'll make sure I got the right documents folder here. I mean, I clearly saw it said documents, so now I'm wondering what the heck happened here. That's why I had set it up prior. Let me see here. Documents, customer docs. If not, I'll just launch it with this. Let me just do this one. It's fine. They're all the same. Okay. I've done that. Now click. Now you can add multiple databases if you have multiple backends that you need to migrate, right? So if you have a split front end, backend, then you want to upload all your backends, and then you can upload all those backends into one master SQL Server database. I don't recommend you create multiple SQL Server databases, right? There's some multiple reasons why you have different Access databases backends. because of limitations in access. You know that size is 2 gigabytes max. As you approach that 2 gigabytes, it gets slower. But you don't have those limitations in SQL Server. So I'm going to click on Next. And it's going to ask me, okay, what do I want to convert? And I'm going to pick queries because I want to make a point. So I'm going to say both queries and tables. I'm going to click on Next. Now it's going to ask to connect to my SQL Server. Now I had to use this 127.0.0.1, which is a local IP address by definition. And I put the port 1433, and I had to both encrypt and trust. So I had to do this here. So if you're watching this video after the fact, I would encourage you to pause it. Make sure you use these same settings when you connect to your local SQL Server. I'm going to click on Next. Oh boy, here we go. If you click Continue Application with Noise Zero. So I don't know why I'm getting this here, but let me check the details. Yeah, I think this wizard is having issues. So I'm going to cancel this wizard. And I'm going to do this manually. So I'm going to click on Connect to SQL Server, which is up here. This is still the migration assistant, right? No wizard. And I got NWS test 2. And I want to make sure that this is not on the server. So let me check the databases here. I do have an NWS test 2. And I want to make a point here. So I'm going to change to NWS test 3. So you can see what happens when you create a new one from scratch. And I'm going to click on Finish. Okay. So it tells me, which is correct, I don't have an NW test 3 on my server. You have to create one. I'm going to say yes. So you don't have to create the database before you migrate it, right? Now, when you do this, keep in mind that there is 2 authentication models with SQL Server. There's Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication. I recommend you use Windows authentication because it affords you more flexibility. You can do domain credentials, for example, and leverage your domain groups. When you use SQL Server authentication, you're separated from your network, and now you have to create passwords and user accounts within SQL Server. You can't leverage your Active Directory domain. It becomes a little bit more complex. All right, wonderful. So I've got my access metadata here. I'm going to click on Expand. NW demo, everything looks good there. And now, before I go and migrate this data, I'm going to run a tool called, let's see here, let me run it this way. Create report, right? So I'm going to right click on my Access database. I'm going to click on Create Report. And what that does is it analyzes all your queries and all your tables. Now, I had picked queries, so that's why it's doing the queries. And they created this wonderful little report for me, which I love, right? And on here, it tells me I got 11 objects that are going to cause me problems. They're not going to be converted. The wizard is not going to be able to convert these 11 objects. I got 4 objects that have a warning, and then I've got 59 objects, which is 79, almost 80%, right? That's going to be converted over. I ignore this manual conversion time. I don't know where they come up with that, but you know, it's not going to take me, an Access expert, 14 hours to convert these 11 objects over. Then it gives me this breakdown, right? So queries, I got 18 objects here, 2 objects that are warnings, and then I've got 10 here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus key here, and I notice, okay, this query, QRY distinct product this week, will not convert. So I'm going to bring up that query in Access and find out why. This one's called distinct products this week. I'm going to go back to Access. I'm going to open my test database. And then I'm going to switch to, let me just continue. And add me. Okay, so I'm just going to say this. I probably should have just bypassed the startup code, but all right, so Guru is my unofficial title. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to switch this over to custom, or by object type, excuse me, and I'm going to search for that query. I'm going to go back to the report just because I forgot what the query was. It's QRY distinct products this week. All right, let's type it in this week. And I'm gonna click this down arrow. I'm gonna bring this up in design view. Let's take a look. All right. So right off the bat, you'll notice that this query is using two functions, the year date function and the format date week. I suspect that these functions are not supported by SQL Server. So I'm gonna right click here, copy, and I'm gonna go to the AI. And I'm gonna start this new conversations. I am an expert in Microsoft Access. I'm gonna train the AI as to what I do, what I'm doing, who am I, and SQL Server. And I'm working on a project migrating Access 365, right? Because that's the actual version, Access 365. If you have perpetual license, it'll be Access 2019, 2022. You want to let them know what version of Access, it does matter. Migrating Access 365 to SQL Server 2022. I need your help. All right? Remember this. Now, I don't think you have to do this anymore, but it's an old habit of mine. All right, so it's going to know when I ask questions in this chat about formulas, queries, conversion. It knows I'm running Access and knows that I'm running SQL Server 2022. All right? All right. All right. Now, one of the things I do, I've got lots of chats here, right? So I'm going to rename this chat that I just got into. And for the most part, a lot of AIs can do the same thing. Claude, I believe, has similar capabilities. Copilot as well. You can use your AI tool of choice. I just happen to love Google Gemini so much I actually got a license. I pay $19 a month for it. Access 365 to 2022 conversion. Now, every time I have a question or so forth, I miswrote the conversion there, I don't care. Anytime I go back to this chat, right? So I got multiple chats here. Wonderful. So I have this function called year date. I am also using SSMA to create and upload the data to SQL Server. Again, the more you teach the AI system what you're doing, the better results you're going to get out of it, right? Now, I noticed that I used the abbreviation SQL Server Migration Assistance, SSMA, on purpose. And let's see if it captured that I'm talking about SQL Server Migration Assistant for Access. The official name is SSMA, right? Since you're an expert, I'll skip the how-to basic. Focus on, right? Critical schema configurations project says, before you hit convert schema, adjust these settings. I agree with some of these, right? Always add timestamp columns, which is great. That's a great tip. I love that. Data type mappings, make sure often maps datetime to 7 by default on your SLS abbreviation, right? The issue. Access VBA date essentially a double. Datetime 2 is more precise. Round-trip conversion can cause data change errors that pushes mismatch. The recommendation, map access date to datetime legacy or datetime 2.0. It's another great tip. And we're going to see this attachment here. All right, so now where do I make these changes? So I'm going to go back into SSMA. And I'm going to go into Tools, and I'm going to go to Global Settings. Actually, no, I'm going to go to Project Settings. So Tools, Project Settings. And let's see if it's in General, Identifiers, Warn When, Migration. Let's go to Migration. Let me see what the AI was saying about the time stamping. Just Tools, Project Settings, General Conversion. Okay, so I gotta go to General Conversion. Notice this conversion here. So I'm gonna go General Conversion. All right, enable fixing include data assessment on missed and the promise one with a complex query, add primary key, add type sign. All right, so I'm not going to let MSS on the side. I want to make sure every table always has a timestamp. Now, this timestamp is a unique field type in SQL Server. And what it does, Access uses it to determine if a record has been updated. Let's say, for example, two of us are working on an invoice at the same time. Pretty rare, but it might happen you have two users working on the same invoice at the same time in the company. Whoever saves last, of course, wins their changes, right? Saves their changes last. Or sometimes you might be wondering to yourself, okay, am I editing the last record for this? So Access uses the timestamp field through the ODBC drive to determine whether or not the record you're working is the latest version or not. And when you don't use timestamp, that causes issues. There are some unique circumstances where you don't want to use timestamp. And a fellow Access MVP, Armin Stein, has a wonderful article on timestamp on his website. I have used timestamp every time on all my SQL Server tables. I've never had the need to not use timestamp, so I'm going to say always. All right, I'm going to go back to the Migration Assistant. I'm sorry, the AI. All right, so I got the timestamp covered. Data type mapping, right? Someone mapped this date time to date time 00, right? So I'm going to do that here and here. So date time mapping. Let me see if I can look for it here. Migration, check constraints, date correction, replace on support date. I don't think it's here, but let me just double check. No, check constraints, type mapping. All right, so I gotta go to type mapping. And we'll go, all right, so that's already set to date time too. Perfect. Back to the AI. Data migration, performance, batch size. All right, so the other stuff is fine. All right, good. So SMA is telling me that a query using the function year date can't be converted. Why? Because SMA is not telling you why it's not being converted. It just says can't, right? I know the answer to that already because there is no date function in SQL Server. The equivalent function in SQL Server is called getDate. Which leads me to this point. You don't normally convert your queries over to SQL Server. There's several reasons I don't recommend you do that. Number one, it's a lot easier to work with your queries in Access. Number two, you're creating more objects in SQL Server. It's going to make your SQL Server database more complex. And number three, you run into these issues here, right, where you absolutely want to leverage local functions or call local functions in Access in your queries, which are not available in SQL Server. All right. So a technical reason, date 2 returns the current system at all time. SQL Server date does not exist. This is the number one issue, right? So when you're using date in your query, it's not going to convert. It's just not, right? All right, so I'm going to go back to the migration system and click on apply. Okay, and now I'm going to uncheck the queries. And I'm going to run this report again. And let's take a look. All right, so now I've shot down to one object error, right? And that is, let's see here. These are good, and this one is an object, and then there's one here. All right. Data type is not supported. Which one is that? Oh, the employees table. Let me go take a look. So when I open the employees table in design view, let's close this query. I'm going to open the employees table in design view. Why is it not supported to convert? All right, so I start scanning through these fields and bingo. This is why it's not going to convert. The attachment data type is not supported in SQL Server. There is another way to do attachments, by the way, in SQL Server, but that's a topic for another day. it cannot convert this table. So you have several options. Number one, if the customer has never used the attachment field, it's a no-brainer. Just highlight this field and delete it from the table, you're done. Number two, you extract any data there to individual files on the local hard drive and then deal with it later several ways. There's several ways you can deal with this. Let's say, for example, you've got a work order system you're working on, and they use the attachment field to take photos of the job they worked on and upload to Access. A perfectly legitimate way to leverage attachment fields in Access. I don't ever recommend using attachment field, by the way, because it bloats your Access database quite quickly. It can get real quick and become inoperable real quick, so I always stay away from it. But if there's data there, you want to extract that, identify which records are associated with, and then later on deal with it. There's several ways you can use to deal with it. Number one, you can use relative links. So if the whole system's running on the local network, you could create a folder on the network drive and identify the record by the folder number, right? The folder record number one corresponds to folder number one, and there's the attachments for that record. So order number one would have the file name, the directory name one, and then all the files there. And then you can use a table in SQL Server with the links to those files in each record. Or option number two, you can upload those attachments to SQL Server. Now the purists out there for SQL Server do not like that. They're like, no, don't use SQL Server for file management, right? Use SQL Server for data. I don't agree with that. Mostly I'm dealing with small businesses, and I know why they suggest it, but I am dealing with small businesses, and they're never going to exceed, for the most part, they're never going to exceed 10 gigabytes of hard drive space for their database. And so using the attachment field, the equivalent field in SQL Server is going to be fine. All right. So I need to migrate this table, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this field, and then I'm going to save it. Oh, by the way, I can't save it because I remember I had that warning there, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out. Okay, now let me see if I can go to design view. Yeah, that's fine. They didn't get an error message now, so okay, now I can delete it. All right, yes. And now I'm going to close and save. Wonderful. Okay, gonna go back to migration system for Access, and then we'll rerun the report. All right. So it's still giving the same error message because I need to refresh, right, the SQL Server migration system with the data. So I'm gonna do that now. So I'm going to, let's see here. How can I refresh it? Oh yeah, you're right. Thank you very much. I converted the wrong one. Not for its demo. You're right. Thank you for that, Jan. I've got 2 copies here. So let me see if I can bring up this one here. File. MLB test 2 is in documents. So it's in one Soto, OneDrive, IT impacting documents, and W test 2. All right. Now I believe I go to Control G and then say current project.path. That will save me a lot of work. All right, so I'm gonna highlight this. Control C, go back to SQL Server Assistant, right click, go to database, add a database, paste that there. All right, so this is the one I just worked on. 1D4. Tables, right click, create report. All right, so now I'm just down to 3 object warnings. High complete column convert to text. Primary key or unique index has a new null value. This is a big one. Your primary key should not have a null value. Agreed? So that's some hanky-panky going on there. Hyperlink, I'm not concerned about. So I'm gonna go back to that. Boy, that employee table is causing all kinds of problems. And this is what you typically see when you do this for clients, by the way. So I'm gonna double click here, employee ID. Well, let's take a look. What is the primary key on this one? Design view. Employee ID, auto number. Well, auto number. I don't see any null value, so I'm gonna ignore that for some reason. Okay, so this is good. Table is good. All right. So I fixed my issues. Now remember the part one we talked about slowness issues. You need to correct that before you get to this point here, right? Fix any issues in Access before you do this. All right. Moment of truth. We're going to convert, load, and migrate, right? We're going to convert, load the data, migrate over to SQL Server. There it goes. All right. Oh, what's my feedback? No, I don't have time for feedback. All right, so I love this because what it says is, okay, it can't find these tables in SQL Server, which is correct, right? These are my local tables in Access, and it didn't find those, which is what we expected, okay? So I'm gonna click on OK. All right, it's gonna load the objects, which is, I'm assuming it means it's gonna create those tables. Now it's migrating the data over. This part is essential. Got one error, so we gotta find out what the error is. So let's take a look at the report. Customers, all right. 8 rows, 0, right? Employees, 11 rows, 0 migrated, right? Our migration failed because employees, as you can imagine, is a critical table. 0%. By the way, I love this summary, right? Because a lot of times you wonder, did it migrate all the data? And did it migrate it well? So you want to screenshot this and prove to your customer, hey, when I did the migration, it all came across as 100%. In this case, it did, right? Or you can click on Save Report here. All right. So we got to fix that. Now, if I go back to SQL Server, bring up Management Studio here, and I refresh my databases. Let's see here, refresh. There's my test 3. I go to tables, and there are my tables, right? Oh, there's an employee table, but if I right click and I select top 1000 rows, all right, it's empty. So no data was migrated over. Don't say. We gotta fix the issue, right? One error. 0 length not allowed, flag converted. The 0 length not allowed flag on the column customer name was converted to a check constraint. Okay, so it looks like there is a, let's see here, errors, employee tables. Let's go back to the employee table. Employees, let's take a look at the data, figure out why it can't be converted. Job title, primary phone number, secondary phone number, title. All right, Windows username, admin. This is why I picked this database, right? Because I knew it was going to cause issues when I migrated it over. Okay. So, internet bot. Love that. Internet sales. Let me take a look at the migration report again. Employees. Warning. Let's see, warning 2. Error info. 0 length not allowed, flag converted. Customers. New timestamp column created. Okay, that's good. Not much help here in terms of why it's not converting over. Not allowed, flag converted. 0 length not allowed flag. Yeah, I know, right? The PK being null. I put this in design view. And I got primary key there. The primary key is there. It's an auto number. And so if I click on create, see here. Table design. So the primary key is highlighted. I'm going to go ahead and make this fixed. Okay. Primary key is highlighted. Let's check the constraints here. Indexes. All right. So I got indexes. First name. Primary, no. Unique, yes. Ignore, no. Last name. ID, last name, primary, no. Unique, yes. Employee ID, primary key, yes. Unique. Test 2 versus test 3. Windows username. Well, I'm in. Okay, so let's just double check that. Current project name. I'm now test 2, and what did I convert? Yeah, I'm test 2. They're both the same. Thank you, Malcolm, for that, but they're the same. All right, let's take a look at the report again. Error message, tables, employees, details. All right, here we go. Table converted 0, objects with issues 1. System element converted, system conversion. Column 16, primary key 1, unique constraint 3. Not much information here, which is a little frustrating. Now I added a new record, which is my name. I wondered if I deleted it and tried it again if it would work. So I'm just going to delete this. And I'm going to go back to, I'm going to close this table. I'm going to go back to the SQL Server Migration Assistant. And now I'm going to uncheck all the tables and pick out employees. And then I'm going to right click. And I'm going to migrate data, right? Because it's already been created. There's no need for me to create the table in SQL Server. Let's try this one more time. Status, success rate 0, close. All right, let's see if I can do migrate data. It's just errored out on me. Total time migrate success rate for some reason is not. The following error occurred during the current. Cannot find duplicate key. Cannot find duplicate row and object. TB employees with unique index. Employees Windows username. All right. So it looks like the username needs to be unique. So let's bring up, now we know why. I'm gonna bring up the table. And let's go to the username. All right, so Windows username here is a problem, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to copy their first name over as our username. And see, oh, look at that, invalid user, no. Andrew. Jan. For some reason they created it created the index, and Maria, Stephen, Michael, Robert, Laura, and Ian, and then finally Internet. This is a terrible name, but it is what it is. All right. Good. So I got all the usernames there. Now I'm going to try the conversion again. Let's see if the fourth time is the charm. All right, there you go. I got 10 rows migrated, 100% successful. Yay! All right, let's take a look at that employee table in Management Studio because we have some constraints, right, in Access. So you hit the plus sign here, and you can see the constraints already here, and it converted those constraints over to the SQL Server equivalent, right? Zero length. This allows zero length for added by and so forth. So that's where you can check, right? I mean, technically you're supposed to check that the table design SQL Server is the same way as in Access to avoid issues. All right. So we had two issues, right? Number one, we had index on a table that was not reflected by the data, right? So there was some data. So I don't know how that happened. There was a glitch there, but somebody added the index and it was successful, even though that the data was not unique for this network username. And number two, it didn't support the attachment field, so I just go ahead and deleted that. All right, wonderful. So I'm gonna go back to Migration Assistant and I'm gonna save this project. Why? I want the metadata, right? Set the load to the project metadata, so I must click on save. Why is it important that I save? Because I'm gonna show you something tonight that's gonna save you hours later on when you do this. Think about the anatomy of your SQL Server Access project, Access SQL Server project. When a customer hires us, it's going to be weeks for us to convert, sometimes months, and it's even taking a year to convert to a database. Throughout that time, there's going to be many times where we need to refresh the data in SQL Server from Access. Because when you give a beta to a customer, you said, here we are, Mr. Customer, try this beta out. The first thing that customers want to do is want to compare apples to apples. And for most likely, when you first grabbed that data was several weeks or months ago. And they're going to come back and complain. It says, one, when I run the report in the new version, I'm missing orders. Of course, because I didn't update the data in SQL Server, right? So I always make a point, and I always ask my employees, make sure before you give something to the customer task that you upload the data one more time. All right, so let's assume the day has come and I'm ready to do a beta. So I'm going to close the wizard. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to change this table, right? Remember when I first did this, I used internet as a username for the internet bot. Now I'm going to go in here. I'm going to update the data, all right? And I'm going to call it bot. All right, still getting the zero message. Close that. Now just to double check, I'm going to go into SQL Server Migration or SQL Server Assistant. I'm going to select top 1,000 rows, and you'll see here that indeed it says internet, right, when I migrate the data. So I'm going to come over here with the username. There it is, right? Internet. Wonderful. Okay, great. I'm going to leave this up, and actually, no, I'm not going to leave it up just in case I have a lock. I have a read lock on that table, but all right. I'm going to bring up the Migration Assistant. The day has come. I need to migrate the data one more time to SQL Server. I'm going to close this. I'm going to open my project. Open project. Test 3. I'm going to come in here. And I'm going to go to databases and look for test. Picked all my tables. I'm going to right click and I'm going to migrate the data. Notice that I already connected to my SQL Server, although it says offline. So let me just connect first to SQL Server. Reconnect to SQL Server. All right, connection successful, wonderful. Going to migrate the data again. All right. Well, we knew this contains data. If you continue with the immigration, all data on the table will be there. All right. Let me just cancel this. I just want to double check something. All right. Only remember that last time I did only to employees. Let me update. Let me update all the tables, right? Because I want to migrate all my data. All right. So I'm gonna go migrate data. All right. Great. And this is normal. Yeah, it's going to overwrite. That's something to keep in mind, right? When you give an alpha version, a beta version to a customer, every time you migrate the data from Access, it's going to overwrite the table, which is fine, but that's what we want. I'm going to continue. All right. Again, I get my 100% across the board, which is one default. I'm going to go back into my SQL Server Management Studio. Right click on employees, select top 1000 rows. Take a look at that bot and the username. Come on, there it is, it's bot, right? So it's just a wonderful way to update the data easily with no pain. Couple things. Number one, raise your hand if you ever had a customer change the design of your Access database between the time you picked it and the time you're ready to do the alpha, right? I mean, it can happen. Some of these customers I have are very hands-on. They add fields, they add tables, and now we're not dealing with the same thing, right? So usually, instead of just migrating the data, I may have to also update the design of the tables. SQL Server, excuse me. That's why I tell customers, do not change the design of the Access database because it's going away. Now, there are some times where they have to change it because, again, it's been a year and the business needs a new feature, a new field, new table. Sometimes you can't get away from it. All right. So you'll be running this migrate data multiple times throughout the life of the project based on the complexity of the Access database and how many times you want to give the latest version to the. By the way, there's a migrate data up here at the top. Okay. Let's talk about queries. We did not migrate the queries. There are some queries that are going to be, I'm going to say yes, I'm going to update this. There are some queries that you're going to need to convert into views in SQL Server. Which ones? Well, usually the ones that take too much time. Now, this is a very small database. Everything's going to run quick in Access, right? If I run these queries, I'm just not going to have anything. Now, if I were to take the time, for example, and load 100,000 records into employees, 1,000,000 records into orders, then when I run these queries, I will see performance issues. But there's a rule of thumb when it comes to converting your queries over to SQL Server views. When it's too long, when it takes too long. When it takes too long, it's subjective. What it takes long to me may not take long to you, and vice versa, right? And I remember I mentioned that story to you guys in part one, where we went to the customer and we said, hey, this report's taking 30 seconds. Oh, that's great. It used to take 3 minutes in Access. Well, we can further reduce it, right, by creating a view. Oh, no, don't worry about it. I run that report once a month. I can wait the 30 seconds. Don't spend time on that. Or in other words, don't spend money converting that, right? So it is important that you take into account, right, what is the speed is relevant. Number two, when you first do this conversion to SQL Server, or when you create a new database from scratch, everything works great. Everything works hunky-dory. Oh, I'm going to create this query, local query in Access. And you know, when you're a developer, you get this tunnel vision, you test the same things over and over again. But as time progresses, you roll out the system. Let's say for example, roll out the system this month, November. By next November, a year later, you start getting complaints from the customer. Hey, you know that order form is taking longer to load. Of course, because you added data, a year's worth of data, you never bothered to optimize the query or convert it to a view, And now it's taking longer, right? At first it was super quick, and then became quick, and then became okay, and now it's too slow. So it's kind of difficult to make that judgment call on spending time and effort on which queries to convert until you get some kind of feedback from your customer that yes, indeed, those queries are too slow and I need you to work on them. But you also need to prepare your customer. Say, look, we don't want to blow the budget on converting all these queries. We want to see how it goes, right? And if you identify anything that's slow, again, slow is subjective, let us know and we'll work on it, right? So next month, we're meeting on the second Tuesday of the month in December. And we're going to work on queries, right? How do we convert queries over to SQL Server? What are the gotchas? Again, we're going to rely heavily on AI. Now, I have some news I want to share with you guys, but before we do that, I'm going to unmute you guys and ask you if you have any questions regarding tonight's topic. Let me see here. Ask all to unmute. All right, here we go. Do you have any questions for me about converting using the Migration Assistant, SQL Server Management Studio? Now's the time. Okay. So today, Google released Gemini 3.0. I'm super excited about this model. I recommend you give it a try. I have a video explaining this. It's a little technical. The video is a little technical because it's one of the AI podcasts I follow. When you wonder how I keep on top of this AI news, this is one of the podcasts I follow. So let me send you a link to that podcast. I already have it here, I believe. Let me get there. I'll put the link in the comments here. Let's see here. History, and copy. Share, copy. Is paying $20 a month worth it? Oh my goodness. $20 a month has been so worth it to do it because if you hear, this is one thing about Google Gemini. All these companies, Anthropic, right, that does Claude, all these different companies, they have different models. They have different tiers. There's the free tier, which I don't encourage you to use because your data now is available to them, right? That's the problem with free. You upload a document, they have access to the document, right? There is the $20 a month, right? Across the board, they all have the $20 a month plan. Then they have the Pro plan. Well, when I tried Claude 6 months ago, at $20 a month was just way too limiting. I would run it and it says, oh, you have to wait now. You're exhausted. I'm like, come on, make me wait. I'm a consultant. I charge by the hour. I can't wait. So I tried the $200 a month. I tried it. And again, I ran into limitation because I was using it a lot. Then I switched to Google Gemini. Oh my gosh, I have yet to have gotten a response from Google Gemini saying that I need to wait, which is great. Plus, it's a wonderful model. It's wonderful. And they just released today Google Anti-Gravity, which I encourage you to give it a try. So let me just give you this link in the comments. Try Google Anti-Gravity. If you ever use Cursor with AI, this is Google's version of IDE, Integrated Development Environment. I already downloaded it. I'm playing around with it here. And we're going to show you, and so in 3 months, so we got 2 more sessions, right, of the SQL Server Access Academy for December, January, and then in February, excuse me, we got 2 more, yeah. In February, we're going to do an extensive AI with Access. I have some new techniques, new tools that's going to allow you to, it's going to blow you away, where we're going to be able to extract data from Access, the table designs, the form designs, upload those to an AI model, have the AI model recognize what the system does, even create visual representation of forms and form of text. It's just awesome. I've been playing around with it. And then have it add new features to forms, reports, and so forth, because it has all the data it needs to do that. So that's coming along in February. Hopefully you can join me for that. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. This has been Access MVP Juan Soto live from the Caribbean, because I'm here in the Caribbean for throughout the winter. And I look forward to seeing you again the second Tuesday in December, which would be December. Let me look up the date real quick. All right, let's see. The date is December 9th. See you then. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate that. 12-9. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. Malcolm, thank you for the thumbs up. So long, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.